Our world is wired. We're now so utterly dependent on digital systems that a cyber attack on our energy, water or financial infrastructure could bring much of our everyday lives, even the global economy, grinding to a halt. And yet most of us are simply not aware of the threat.
What the world is poised waiting for is a big event that is really going to wake people up.
This is a cat and mouse game. The attackers are constantly developing new strategies.
When we go to war, we're going to go to war with our networks.
Cyber attacks on our wired world could take many forms: nation against nation, cyber terrorism, or organised crime. We're now so utterly dependent on digital systems that cyber attack could affect us all. Everyone tells us that governments, their intelligence agencies and industry are all waking up now to this new cyber threat. But how ready are they to cope when it's hard to imagine where in the world the next threat may come from and exactly what it's going to look like? Military and civil defence are having to work together. After all, in many countries, the bulk of national critical infrastructure is owned and run by commercial companies. Defence contractors like Northrop Grumman are offering to train both the public and private sector to deal with attacks on their systems.
So this is the cyber range. Think of it like a flight simulator, in the same way that you wouldn't want to try dangerous experiments with aircraft on the real aircraft, but you use a flight simulator. This is just the same, but for networks. The
idea is to display data from these exercises in a modern-day equivalent of the military sandpit.
I'm now zooming into Washington, D.C., and we can see the metro system of Washington, D.C. Of course, the metro system is controlled by digital systems, which are, of course, vulnerable to cyber attack. So we're seeing the metro system, we're seeing various positions of hospitals, police stations, fire stations, and that kind of thing.
But is this kind of cyber simulation just helping to keep defence companies in business, or do we really need to think in a new way about new types of threat?
There's things out there that right now that exist that the general public really doesn't know about. Stealthy type technologies that can be embedded into systems that will run that you'll never see.
To do what kind of thing?
To do things like you can turn off the power grid, disrupt water systems, disrupt manufacturing processes. There's other things out there you could do. GPSs in cars have capabilities to give them the wrong directions, have your car catch fire potentially, depending on how you program it.
And as global cyber traffic increases, there have already been cyber events that hint at what cyber warfare between opposing states might look like. Government websites came under attack in Estonia in 2007, on both sides of the Russia-Georgia dispute over South Ossetia in 2008, and again in 2009 in the so-called 4th of July Independence Day attacks. In each case, so-called denial-of-service attacks swamped the websites with mass traffic. Rival nation-states were suspected, but proof of who was behind each attack has remained elusive. But one cyber event stands out above all others. That's the Stuxnet computer virus that one Iranian official described as electronic war against the nation's controversial uranium enrichment program. Symantec monitors cyber attacks on clients' networks around the clock. Its experts unpicked Stuxnet, a first because it attacked a physical target using cyber methods. They say they'd never seen anything like it before, aimed at the operating system of industrial devices.
What it was looking for was motors operating at a specific speed, so basically between 807 and 1012 hertz in speed, What we know is that there are very few devices that operate at this speed. So some devices that we know that do operate at that speed are centrifuges that would be used in uranium enrichment.
So who carried out the Stuxnet attack? There's plenty of speculation that US or Israeli teams could have been behind it. And it's pretty safe to say that whoever it was didn't like the idea of the Iranians refining uranium. And there are some clues in the code itself.
We believe it was some sort of nation state behind it, and sort of had some sort of state backing in order to fund it and resource it. It certainly would not necessarily be your typical malicious code writer, would not necessarily have this broad range of skills or the resources or really the information to hand to be able to pull off this sort of attack.
It was not a criminal element. It was probably a nation state that developed it. This was not something that was done in a compressed cycle. This was several years in development. There is evidence to support it was a long-term program, and for some reason it was accelerated at the last moment.
For governments, there's also the blunt instrument of just turning the internet off, as Egypt did in the early days of the uprising there. But that's only if you're the kind of regime that would tell internet service providers what to do. And that same recent cascade of popular uprisings, from Iran to Tunisia to Egypt, has shown the world just how powerful a weapon command of cyberspace can be for the hacktivist.